January 27, 2020. Colorado Springs, Colorado. An 11-year-old boy got into his stepmother's car to run errands. When the car returned hours later, only she got out. What happened during that drive, and where police would eventually find him 1,400 miles away, would become one of Colorado's most heartbreaking cases. If you believe children deserve justice and voices that won't be silenced, please like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Cases like Gannon's demand we stay informed and vigilant. Gannon Stauch was 11 years old, a fifth grader in Colorado Springs. He loved video games, especially his Nintendo Switch. Loved playing with his younger sister. Just a normal boy living a normal life. He lived with his father, Albert Stauch, and his stepmother, Letecia Stauch, in the Lorson Ranch neighborhood. Albert was in the National Guard. When he was deployed, Letecia took care of Gannon and his sister. Gannon's biological mother, Landon Hyatt, lived in South Carolina. She and Albert had divorced years earlier, but Landon stayed close with Gannon, called him regularly, FaceTimed when she could. Even though she lived 1,200 miles away, she was still very much his mom. Letecia had been in Gannon's life for several years. She and Albert married when Gannon was around 8. She'd become his stepmother. On social media, she posted photos of the kids, wrote about how much she loved being a mom, presented the image of a happy blended family. That Monday morning, January 27th, started like any other day. Gannon went to school, came home that afternoon. Letecia was there. Albert was away on National Guard duty. Just Letecia and the kids at home. According to Letecia, Gannon wasn't feeling well that evening. Complained about his stomach. She gave him medicine, put him to bed early. Tuesday, January 28th. Gannon didn't go to school. Letecia called to report him sick. Said he was staying home. The school marked him absent. Nothing unusual. Kids get sick. Letecia said Gannon stayed in his room most of Tuesday, resting, playing on his Nintendo Switch. Normal sick day activities. Wednesday, January 29th. Gannon still hadn't returned to school. Letecia called again. Another sick day. Then that evening, around 6:55 p.m., Letecia called 911. She reported Gannon missing. She told the dispatcher he'd gone to a friend's house that afternoon and hadn't come home. Said she'd been searching for him, calling people, couldn't find him anywhere. El Paso County Sheriff's Office responded immediately. Officers arrived at the house, started gathering information. Letecia said Gannon had left between 3 and 4 p.m. to visit a friend nearby. She told him to be back before dark, but he never came home. The search began. Officers knocked on doors, checked parks, checked friends' houses. Nobody had seen Gannon. Deputies checked the friend's house Letecia mentioned. The family said Gannon never showed up. Wasn't there. Wasn't expected. This was the first inconsistency. Letecia said Gannon went to this friend's house, but the friend's family said he never came by. By late Wednesday night, an 11-year-old boy had vanished. Albert was notified at his National Guard assignment. He rushed home immediately. His son was missing. Landon got the call in South Carolina. Her son was missing 1,200 miles away. She booked the first flight she could find. Thursday, January 30th. The search intensified. Search and rescue teams, K-9 units, hundreds of volunteers, everyone looking for Gannon. Local news covered the story. A missing 11-year-old. The community rallied, shared his photo, organized search parties. Detectives interviewed Letecia extensively, asked her to walk through everything that happened. Her story kept changing. First she said Gannon left Monday afternoon, then Tuesday, then maybe Monday. The timeline was inconsistent. When someone's story keeps changing in a missing child case, that's a red flag. Detectives also collected surveillance footage from neighbors' cameras, Ring doorbells, security systems. One neighbor had a camera pointing toward the Stauch house. Captured vehicles, people, activity. Detectives obtained that footage. On Friday, January 31st, they reviewed it carefully. and what they saw contradicted everything Letecia had told them. The footage showed Letecia's truck leaving the house Monday morning at 10:13 a.m., not Wednesday like she claimed, Monday, and when the truck left, 2 people got in, Letecia and a child, Gannon. The truck was gone for over 4 hours. At 2:19 p.m., the truck returned, but when Letecia got out, she was alone. No child got out with her. The camera angle showed both sides of the truck clearly. If Gannon had gotten out, they would have seen it. Gannon got in that truck Monday morning. Only Letecia got out when it returned. Where was Gannon? Detectives confronted Letecia with the surveillance footage on Friday, January 31st. They showed her the video, showed her the truck leaving at 10:13 a.m. Monday morning, showed her returning alone at 2:19 p.m. They asked her directly, "Can you explain this? Where did you and Gannon go? Why didn't you mention this earlier?" Letecia's demeanor changed when she saw the video. She'd been caught in a lie. She couldn't deny what the camera had captured. She changed her story again. Said, okay, yes, she and Gannon did go out Monday morning. She said she'd forgotten about that. Said with all the stress of Gannon being missing, she'd gotten confused about the timeline. She said they went to get medication for Gannon's stomach. Stopped at a store. Ran some errands. Then came home. Detectives pressed her. If you came home with Gannon, why doesn't the video show him getting out? Letecia insisted Gannon did come home with her. Said he got out on the passenger side. Said the camera probably didn't catch it. Said he went straight to his room because he wasn't feeling well. But detectives weren't convinced. The camera showed both sides of the truck clearly. If Gannon had gotten out, they would have seen it. They asked more questions. Where exactly did you go? Which store? Who saw you? Can anyone verify your story? Letecia's answers were vague. She couldn't remember which store. Maybe a Walmart. Or King Soopers. She wasn't sure. She didn't think anyone they knew saw them. The detectives documented everything. The changing story. The vague details. The lack of anything verifiable. All red flags. While detectives questioned Letecia, forensic teams were searching the Stauch home. On Saturday, February 1st, they entered with a warrant. They were looking for evidence. Any indication of what happened to Gannon. They started with Gannon's bedroom. At first glance, the room looked normal. Clean. Nothing obviously wrong. But when they applied luminol to test for blood, the room lit up. There was blood on the carpet. Blood on the baseboard. Blood spatter on the wall. Not just a little. Enough to indicate significant bleeding. And there were signs of cleanup. Someone had scrubbed the carpet, wiped the walls, tried very hard to remove the blood. But luminol reveals what the eye can't see. It showed what had been there, what someone tried to hide. Forensic teams documented everything, took photos, collected samples, cut out sections of carpet, swabbed the walls. The samples were sent to the lab. DNA testing would confirm whose blood it was. While the home was being searched, other detectives analyzed Letecia's phone. They'd obtained a warrant for her phone records, her text messages, her internet search history, everything. What they found was damning. On Monday, January 27th, the same day she left with Gannon and returned alone, Letecia made numerous Google searches. At 1:47 p.m., can cadaver dogs smell through concrete? At 2:31 p.m., how long does blood take to dry? At 3:04 p.m., can you be charged with murder without a body? At 3:42 p.m., how far can cadaver dogs smell? These weren't the searches of someone whose child was sick at home. These were the searches of someone who knew something terrible had happened. Someone researching how to hide evidence. The detectives created a timeline, showed exactly what Letecia searched and when. The pattern was clear. Monday afternoon, before she ever reported Gannon missing, she was researching blood, cadaver dogs, and murder charges. Letecia's truck was also processed. Forensic teams examined every inch. They found blood, small amounts but present. Testing would confirm it was Gannon's blood. They found evidence that something heavy had been transported in the truck bed. Scratches, compression marks. They also found excessive cleaning supplies. multiple bottles of bleach, disinfectant, heavy-duty cleaners, more than someone would normally carry. All the evidence pointed in one direction. Something violent happened to Gannon in his bedroom. Letecia knew about it. She tried to clean it up. She researched how to hide evidence. She transported something in her truck. And Gannon hadn't been seen since Monday morning. As February began, the public search continued. Hundreds of volunteers still showed up daily, still walked through fields, still hoped they'd find Gannon alive. But investigators knew better. The evidence told a grim story. Gannon wasn't lost in the woods. He wasn't going to be found alive. Gannon Stauch was dead, and Letecia knew what happened to him. The question now was, where was his body? On February 13th, a witness came forward. Someone who knew Letecia, who'd been with her in the days after Gannon disappeared. The witness told detectives that Letecia had asked for help moving something. A heavy suitcase. Said she needed help loading it into her truck. The witness had helped her. At the time, didn't think much of it. Just thought Letecia was moving luggage. But now, with Gannon missing and Letecia acting suspicious, the witness was connecting the dots. That suitcase, the way Letecia had been acting, nervous, paranoid, constantly looking around. It all made sense now in a horrible way. The witness described the suitcase. Large, hard-sided, heavy, very heavy. The witness had helped carry it from inside the house to Letecia's truck. Letecia had been anxious, kept checking if neighbors were around, kept saying to hurry. This information was crucial. A heavy suitcase, large enough to contain what detectives feared most. The witness told them when this happened. The date, the time, where Letecia said she was taking it. Detectives now had more pieces, but they still needed to find Gannon. Still needed physical proof. Still needed to locate his body. The investigation was about to take a major turn, because Letecia wasn't in Colorado anymore. She'd left the state, and where she'd gone would lead to the most heartbreaking discovery. If you believe children deserve justice and voices that won't be silenced, please like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Cases like Gannon's demand we stay informed and vigilant. On March 2nd, 2020, Letecia Stauch was arrested. She was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, more than 1,500 miles from Colorado Springs. She was charged with first-degree murder of a child under 12, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased human body, tampering with physical evidence. The arrest came as relief to some, validation that their suspicions were correct. But it also brought devastating confirmation. Gannon was dead. The 11-year-old they'd been searching for wasn't coming home. Landon Hyatt broke down when she heard the news. Her son was gone. The woman who was supposed to care for him had killed him. Albert Stauch was shattered. The woman he'd married. The woman he'd trusted with his children. She'd murdered his son. But there was still one critical question. Where was Gannon's body? Letecia wasn't talking. She'd hired an attorney, invoked her right to remain silent. She wasn't giving investigators anything. Detectives knew she'd been in South Carolina. They knew she'd driven there. They believed she'd transported Gannon's body, hidden it somewhere along the way. Searches began along the route from Colorado to South Carolina, in wooded areas, in remote locations, anywhere Letecia might have stopped. Days passed, then weeks. Gannon's body still hadn't been found. Landon and Albert were desperate. They needed to bring their son home, needed to give him a proper burial, needed closure. Then on March 17, 2020, a road worker in Pace, Florida was clearing brush along Highway 90, a rural stretch, not much traffic, mostly woods. He found something, a suitcase, lying in the brush off the roadside, damaged, had been there a while. When authorities opened the suitcase, they found human remains. A child. DNA testing confirmed everyone's worst fear. It was Gannon Stauch. He'd been found, 1,400 miles from home, hidden in a suitcase, discarded on the side of a highway. The autopsy revealed the cause of death. Gannon had been stabbed, multiple times. He'd also been shot. The violence inflicted on this 11-year-old was incomprehensible. The medical examiner's report showed this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of anger that went too far. This was sustained, brutal violence. Letecia had killed Gannon in his bedroom. Then she'd spent days trying to cover it up. Cleaning, researching online how to hide evidence, planning how to dispose of his body. She'd put him in a suitcase, loaded him into her truck, and driven halfway across the country to dump him. She'd made that drive while Albert was frantically searching, while Landon was praying for good news, while hundreds of volunteers were looking for Gannon. Letecia knew he was already dead. She knew where he was, and she said nothing. The case against her was now complete. Physical evidence, digital evidence, witness testimony, surveillance footage, Gannon's body, everything prosecutors needed. But Letecia still maintained her innocence. Even with overwhelming evidence, she claimed she didn't kill Gannon. The trial was set for 2023, 3 years after Gannon's death. 3 years Landon and Albert would wait for justice. During those years, more details emerged through court filings. Investigators pieced together what happened on January 27, 2020. That morning, Letecia and Gannon were home alone. Something happened. Maybe an argument. Maybe Gannon did something that angered her. Maybe she just snapped. Whatever the trigger, Letecia attacked Gannon in his bedroom. She stabbed him. She shot him. An 11-year-old child, murdered by the woman supposed to protect him. After killing him, she tried to clean up. She covered the blood, started researching how to hide evidence, how to dispose of a body. That's when she put Gannon in the truck. The surveillance camera captured that moment. The truck sitting low, weighted down. She drove somewhere, hid his body temporarily. Then over the next days, she planned her next move. She called the school, reported Gannon sick, bought herself time. She cleaned more, made trips to her truck, carried things out in garbage bags. She searched online. How far can cadaver dogs smell? Can you claim someone ran away? What do police look for in missing children cases? By Wednesday, she had her plan. Report Gannon missing. Say he went to a friend's house. Play the worried stepmom. She called 911. Set everything in motion. But she hadn't counted on surveillance cameras. Hadn't counted on neighbors with Ring doorbells capturing everything. As police investigated, Letecia realized her story wasn't holding up. She needed to dispose of Gannon's body. Permanently, somewhere far away. That's when she drove to Florida, put Gannon in a suitcase, made the 1,400-mile journey, dumped him on Highway 90. She thought he'd never be found, thought the elements would destroy evidence, thought she'd gotten away with it. But she was wrong. If you believe children deserve justice and voices that won't be silenced, please share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Cases like Gannon's demand we stay informed and vigilant. The trial of Letecia Stauch began in April 2023, more than 3 years after Gannon's death. The courthouse in Colorado Springs was packed. Media from across the country covered the case. Landon and Albert were there every day. They needed to see this through, needed to witness justice for their son. Jury selection took time. The case had received massive publicity. Finding impartial jurors was challenging. But eventually a jury was seated. 12 people who would decide Letecia's fate. Opening statements began. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They walked the jury through the evidence, the timeline, the surveillance footage, the blood, the Google searches, the suitcase, the autopsy findings. They showed photos of Gannon, a smiling 11-year-old, full of life, bright eyes, the future ahead of him. Then they showed what Letecia had done to him, the injuries, the brutality, the suitcase in Florida. The prosecution's case was thorough. Witness after witness, expert after expert, mountains of evidence. The surveillance footage was played for the jury. They watched Gannon get in the truck Monday morning, watched the truck return with only Letecia inside. The video didn't lie. Forensic experts testified about the blood in Gannon's bedroom, about the cleanup attempts, about the evidence of significant trauma in that room. Digital forensics experts testified about Letecia's Google searches, her research into hiding bodies, cleaning blood, evading detection. The searches made minutes and hours after Gannon died. The witness who helped move the suitcase testified, described Letecia's paranoid behavior, her nervousness, her constant checking to see if anyone was watching, the weight of that suitcase. The medical examiner testified about Gannon's injuries, the 18 stab wounds, the gunshot, the cause of death, the violence inflicted on this child. The testimony was devastating. Jurors cried. Some looked away during the autopsy photos. Landon sobbed openly. Albert sat with his head in his hands. The prosecution's case took weeks. Every detail documented. Every piece of evidence presented. By the time they rested, the case against Letecia seemed overwhelming. Then came the defense. And this is where things became bizarre. Letecia's attorneys argued she wasn't guilty by reason of insanity. They claimed she suffered from dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities, different identities living in one person. They said Letecia didn't kill Gannon. One of her alternate personalities did. The defense brought psychiatrists who'd evaluated Letecia in jail. These experts testified she showed signs of dissociative identity disorder, that she had alternate personalities with different names, different voices, different behaviors. They claimed these personalities emerged during stress, that Letecia had no control over them, that she couldn't remember what they did. The defense argued that on January 27, 2020, one of these alternate personalities took over. That personality killed Gannon, not Letecia herself. They said Letecia couldn't be held responsible for actions she didn't remember, actions committed by a personality she couldn't control. The prosecution was ready for this. They'd expected this defense. They brought their own mental health experts, experts who'd also evaluated Letecia. And these experts said the dissociative identity disorder was fake, completely fabricated. They testified that Letecia was malingering, faking mental illness to avoid responsibility. They said her behavior didn't match genuine dissociative identity disorder, that her symptoms were too convenient, too performed. They pointed out several key things. Letecia never showed signs of this disorder before her arrest. Not once in her entire life. No previous diagnosis, no treatment history, no indication from anyone who knew her. The disorder only appeared after she was arrested and facing murder charges, after she realized the evidence against her was overwhelming. The prosecution's experts explained that people with genuine dissociative identity disorder don't control when they switch personalities. It happens involuntarily, usually triggered by specific trauma reminders. But Letecia's switches happened conveniently during evaluations, when she was being recorded, when she wanted to demonstrate her condition. One expert testified that Letecia had researched dissociative identity disorder, had looked up symptoms, had watched videos of people with the condition. She was copying behaviors she'd seen, performing mental illness. The jury watched video of Letecia's jail interviews, watched her claim she couldn't remember killing Gannon, watched her switch between personalities, watched her performance. Some jurors looked skeptical. The acting seemed theatrical, overdone, not genuine. Letecia also testified, took the stand in her own defense. This was risky, but the defense felt they needed the jury to hear from her. She sat in the witness box, spoke in a quiet voice, claimed she loved Gannon, would never hurt him, said she couldn't remember what happened that Monday morning. She said she lost time, that she blacked out, that when she came back to awareness, Gannon was gone. She said she panicked, made bad decisions, didn't know what to do. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal. They asked about the Google searches. If you didn't remember what happened, why were you researching cadaver dogs and murder charges? Letecia couldn't answer, said she didn't remember making those searches. They asked about the drive to Florida. If you were in a dissociative state, How did you drive 1,400 miles? How did you stop for gas? How did you check into hotels? Letecia said she didn't remember any of that. Said an alternate personality must have done it. They showed her the surveillance footage. Asked her to explain it. She said she couldn't. Said she didn't remember that day. The prosecution hammered home their point. You're asking this jury to believe that you killed an 11-year-old child, cleaned up the blood, researched how to hide evidence, put him in a suitcase, drove him to Florida, dumped him on a highway, and you don't remember any of it? Letecia maintained that's exactly what she was saying. She had no memory, no control, no responsibility. The jury didn't look convinced. Closing arguments came. The prosecution's closing was powerful and direct. They reminded the jury of the evidence. The video showing Gannon getting in the truck and not getting out. The blood in his bedroom. The Google searches made before he was reported missing. The suitcase. The 1,400-mile drive. The autopsy showing 18 stab wounds and a gunshot. They asked the jury to use common sense. To look at Letecia's actions. The calculated cover-up. The research. The planning. That's not someone in a dissociative state. That's someone consciously trying to avoid consequences. The defense's closing begged the jury to consider mental illness, to show mercy, to understand that Letecia was sick, not evil. But the evidence told a different story. The evidence presented during Letecia's trial revealed disturbing details that hadn't been made public during the investigation. Details that showed just how calculated her actions were. How much planning went into both the murder and the cover-up. Prosecutors presented Letecia's complete Google search history from the weeks before Gannon's death. The searches didn't just start on January 27th after she killed him. They started earlier, much earlier. In early January 2020, weeks before Gannon died, Letecia searched for information about life insurance policies. Specifically, whether step-parents could be beneficiaries on policies for stepchildren. Whether she would receive money if something happened to Gannon. She also searched for information about divorce laws in Colorado, about custody arrangements, about what happens to stepchildren when parents divorce. She was researching her options, planning potential futures. Then in mid-January, her searches took a darker turn. She looked up information about missing children, about how long police wait before starting searches, about whether parents are always suspects when children disappear. She researched accidents, how children die in accidents, what kinds of accidents are considered suspicious versus believable. She was planning, testing scenarios in her mind. The prosecution argued these searches proved premeditation. That Letecia had been thinking about killing Gannon for weeks. That January 27th wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. It was the culmination of weeks of planning. The defense tried to argue the searches were innocent, that lots of people look up random things online, that you can't determine intent from search history alone. But the jury saw the pattern, the progression, the escalation from curious searches to clearly sinister ones. They understood what those searches meant. The trial also revealed details about Letecia's financial situation before Gannon's death. She was struggling, had credit card debt, had made some bad financial decisions, was stressed about money constantly. Some prosecutors theorized this was part of her motive, that she resented supporting Albert's children, that she saw them as financial burdens, that eliminating them would make her life easier financially. Others believed the motive was simpler, pure resentment, anger at being stuck in a role she didn't want, hatred toward a child who represented her husband's past relationship. Whatever the exact motive, the evidence showed Letecia had been unhappy for a long time, had been building toward violence, had been looking for a way out of her situation. The trial also included testimony from Gannon's teachers and school counselors. They were asked if they'd noticed any changes in Gannon's behavior in the months before his death, any signs he was being abused or neglected at home. Most said no. Gannon seemed like a normal kid, happy, engaged. No obvious red flags. But one teacher said something that haunted everyone in that courtroom. She said that in December 2019, about a month before he died, Gannon had written a creative writing assignment about feeling trapped. about wanting to escape from somewhere but not being able to. The teacher hadn't thought much of it at the time. Lots of kids write dramatic stories. It's how they process emotions. She'd given him a good grade and moved on. But looking back, knowing what happened, that story took on new meaning. Was Gannon trying to tell someone something? Was he expressing feelings he couldn't say out loud? We'll never know. But it's possible that Gannon knew something was wrong. Knew he wasn't safe. But didn't know how to ask for help or didn't think anyone would believe him. The prosecution also presented evidence of Letecia's behavior on social media in the days after Gannon's death. While she was publicly posting about being worried and praying for him, she was privately searching for news coverage of the case. She was obsessed with how the story was being reported, whether people believed her, whether anyone suspected her. She monitored every article, every social media post, every comment. She even created fake social media accounts to defend herself, to argue with people who questioned her story. She'd post things like, "Letecia is a good person. I know her personally," or "People need to stop accusing her without evidence." This behavior showed consciousness of guilt. If she truly believed Gannon had just run away or been abducted, why would she care what strangers on the internet thought about her? Why would she spend hours managing her public image instead of focusing on finding him? The trial included testimony from inmates who'd been housed near Letecia in jail while she awaited trial. Several said Letecia had talked about her case, had made statements that suggested guilt. One inmate testified that Letecia had said something like, "They can't prove anything without a body weeks before Gannon's body was found." Another said Letecia had bragged about how smart she'd been, how she'd thought of everything. These jailhouse statements are often viewed skeptically. Inmates sometimes lie to get deals or favors from prosecutors. But multiple inmates telling similar stories added credibility. The defense tried to discredit these witnesses, pointed out their criminal histories, suggested they were lying for reduced sentences. But the prosecution showed that several of these inmates hadn't received any benefits for testifying. They came forward because they were disturbed by what Letecia had said. The trial also revealed that Letecia had tried to destroy evidence beyond just cleaning blood and disposing of Gannon's body. She'd deleted files from her computer, had factory reset her phone before turning it to police, had thrown away bags of items that were never recovered. Digital forensics experts were able to recover some of the deleted data. They found more disturbing searches, more evidence of planning, but some data was permanently lost. We'll never know everything Letecia deleted or destroyed. The most emotional part of the trial was when they played the 911 call from January 29th when Letecia reported Gannon missing. The jury listened to her voice, heard her tell the dispatcher that Gannon had gone to a friend's house and never returned. Knowing what the jury now knew, that 911 call was chilling. Every word was a lie. Every expression of concern was fake. Letecia's voice sounded worried on that call. But it was all performance, all manipulation. After the jury heard that call, prosecutors played other recordings of Letecia's media interviews, of her speaking to neighbors, of her at volunteer search meetings. Every instance where she pretended to be a concerned parent. The contrast between her public persona and the evidence of what she'd actually done was stark. The jury could see how easily she lied, how convincingly she played the role of worried stepmom. Some jurors later said that listening to those recordings was one of the hardest parts of the trial, because Letecia sounded so genuine, so believable. It was disturbing to realize how well she could deceive people. The defense's strategy throughout the trial was to create doubt about Letecia's mental state. Even if she killed Gannon, they argued, she wasn't in control of her actions. She was mentally ill. She needed treatment, not punishment. But the prosecution systematically dismantled this argument. They showed that Letecia had functioned normally in every other aspect of her life during the time she claimed to have dissociative identity disorder. She drove 1,400 miles without incident. She navigated hotels and gas stations. She held normal conversations with family in South Carolina. She managed her social media. She responded appropriately to questions from police. If she truly had multiple personalities taking control of her actions, how could she function so normally? How could she drive across multiple states? How could she maintain complex lies? The answer was clear. She wasn't mentally ill in the way the defense claimed. She was a calculating killer who made deliberate choices. And now she was trying to use mental illness as an excuse. The jury saw through it, and their guilty verdict on all counts reflected that. After sentencing, several jurors spoke to media about their experience. They said the case would stay with them forever, that they'd never forget Gannon's face, that they hoped their verdict brought some measure of peace to his family. They also said they struggled with the death penalty question. Colorado had abolished the death penalty in 2020, but the question of whether Letecia deserved to die came up in jury deliberations anyway. Some jurors felt that what she did to Gannon warranted the ultimate punishment. Others believed life in prison was worse, that dying would be an escape, that living with what she did for decades was the greater punishment. Ultimately, it didn't matter. The law was clear. Life without parole was the sentence. And that's what Letecia received. In the years since the trial, Letecia has continued to maintain that she's innocent. In letters from prison, in appeals documents, in every communication, she claims she was wrongly convicted. She's never admitted to killing Gannon, never shown remorse, never apologized to his family. She remains, to this day, focused entirely on herself, on her own situation, on her own suffering. This lack of remorse has made it impossible for Gannon's family to find any closure. There's no confession, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what she did, just continued denial and self-pity. Mental health professionals who've studied the case say this behavior is consistent with severe narcissistic personality disorder. People with this disorder often cannot accept responsibility for their actions, cannot admit fault, cannot feel genuine empathy for their victims. Letecia may spend the rest of her life genuinely believing she's a victim, that she was wrongly convicted, that everyone else is to blame for her situation. She may never have a moment of clarity where she understands the magnitude of what she did. And for Gannon's family, that may be the cruelest part. Not just that he was killed, but that his killer will never acknowledge his humanity, will never admit he mattered, will never show any indication she understands what she took from the world when she murdered him. The jury deliberated for days. They reviewed evidence carefully, watched the surveillance footage multiple times, read through the autopsy reports, examined the Google search history. This was a serious decision. A woman's life was at stake. They needed to be certain. On May 8, 2023, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Everyone returned to the courtroom. Letecia was brought in. Landon and Albert sat in the front row. The community members who'd followed the case packed the gallery. The judge asked if the jury had reached a verdict. The foreperson stood. "We have, Your Honor." The clerk read the charges one by one, asked for the verdict on each. First-degree murder of a child under 12. Guilty. Landon gasped, covered her mouth, started crying. Child abuse resulting in death. Guilty. Tampering with a deceased human body. Guilty. Tampering with physical evidence. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. Every single one. The jury didn't buy the insanity defense. They saw through it. They held Letecia accountable for what she'd done. Landon collapsed in relief and grief. Her son was gone, but his killer had been convicted. Albert wept. Years of waiting, years of pain. Finally, justice. Letecia showed little emotion, sat quietly, her face blank. She'd been convicted. She was going to prison for the rest of her life. The judge thanked the jury for their service, told them how difficult this case had been, how they'd done their duty admirably. Then he dismissed them. Sentencing would come weeks later. But in Colorado, first-degree murder of a child carries mandatory life in prison. There was no question what the sentence would be. Outside the courthouse, Landon spoke to the media, her voice shaking but strong. "Today we got justice for Gannon, but justice doesn't bring him back. Justice doesn't give me my son. Justice doesn't undo 3 years of pain and grief. But it does ensure that the person who killed him can never hurt anyone else. And that matters. That has to matter. Gannon deserved better. He deserved to grow up. He deserved to live. He deserved protection from the person who was supposed to care for him. Albert didn't speak to media. The pain was too raw. He walked to his car with family members supporting him. The weight of everything too much to bear. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for July 2023. This was when the victim impact statements would be heard. When Gannon's family could finally speak directly about what Letecia had taken from them. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was full again. Landon had prepared a statement, had written and rewritten it dozens of times. Nothing seemed adequate to capture the depth of her loss. The judge called for victim impact statements. Landon approached the podium first. She held photos of Gannon, her hands shaking. "Letecia Stauch, you murdered my son. You took the most precious thing in my life." Gannon was 11 years old. He was innocent. He was a child. And you killed him in the most brutal way possible. Her voice broke, but she continued. 18 stab wounds. 18 times you drove a knife into my baby's body. Then you shot him. Then you put him in a suitcase like he was trash. Like he meant nothing. You drove him 1,400 miles away. You threw him on the side of a highway. You left him alone. Far from home. Far from everyone who loved him. And then you lied. You went on TV and cried fake tears. You hugged my ex-husband and pretended to be worried. You organized search parties. All while knowing exactly where Gannon was. All while knowing what you'd done to him. You let us search in the cold. You let volunteers spend weeks looking for a boy you knew was already dead. You let us hope. And every single day you knew the truth. I will never forgive you. I hope you spend every day for the rest of your life thinking about what you did. I hope Gannon's face haunts you. I hope you never know peace. Albert spoke next, his voice steady but filled with pain. "Letecia, I trusted you. I married you. I brought you into my home, into my family. I trusted you with my children, with Gannon. And you betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. You murdered my son, my little boy who called you mom, who trusted you, who loved you. I have to live with guilt every single day. I brought you into Gannon's life. If I hadn't married you, he'd still be alive. That's something I'll carry forever. But you're the one who made the choice. You're the one who stabbed him. You're the one who shot him. You're the one who threw him away. You did this. And I hope you rot in prison for what you've done." Other family members spoke. Gannon's grandparents, his aunts and uncles, friends of the family, each one describing how Letecia had destroyed their lives, how they'd never be the same. Then the judge addressed Letecia directly. "Ms. Stauch, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of murdering an 11-year-old child who was in your care. The evidence against you was overwhelming. The brutality of what you did to Gannon Stauch is incomprehensible. You stabbed him 18 times. You shot him. You put his body in a suitcase and drove 1,400 miles to dispose of him like garbage. You showed no mercy to that child. No compassion. No humanity. The law in Colorado is clear. For the crime of first-degree murder of a child, the sentence is mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the additional charges, I sentence you to the maximum terms, to run consecutively. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. You will never be free. You will never have another opportunity to hurt anyone. That is the judgment of this court and the will of this community." Letecia was led out of the courtroom, back to jail, where she'd be processed and transferred to the Colorado Department of Corrections, to begin her life sentence, to spend the rest of her days behind bars. After sentencing, Letecia Stauch was transferred to the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility in Gannon City, a maximum security prison, where she would spend the rest of her life. She was placed in protective custody. In prison, crimes against children are viewed with particular disgust. Even among criminals, there's a hierarchy, and child killers are at the bottom, despised by everyone. Letecia's days are now spent in a small cell, alone, no contact with other inmates. 1 hour of recreation per day in a small, enclosed yard. The rest of the time, isolation. She receives no visitors. Her family has cut ties. Her friends want nothing to do with her. She's completely alone with what she did. She's tried to appeal her conviction, filed motions claiming ineffective counsel, claiming the judge was biased, claiming she didn't get a fair trial. Every motion has been rejected. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The jury reached the right verdict. There's no legal basis for overturning her conviction. The aftermath of Gannon's murder revealed more disturbing details about Letecia's behavior in the months before his death. Investigators discovered she'd been researching violent crimes for months, looking up cases, reading about how people got caught, how evidence was found. This suggested premeditation, that she'd been thinking about violence long before January 27th. Friends and family who knew Letecia were interviewed extensively after the trial. Many said they'd never suspected she was capable of murder. She seemed like a normal person, dramatic sometimes, self-centered, but not a killer. Others said they'd noticed red flags, small things, the way she spoke about Gannon and his sister when Albert wasn't around, the resentment in her voice, the frustration, the lack of genuine warmth. One person close to the family said Letecia had complained multiple times that Albert's kids were ruining her life, that she'd signed up to be a military wife, not a full-time stepmom to someone else's children, that she felt trapped. Another said Letecia had anger issues, that she could snap over small things, that they'd witnessed her yelling at the kids for minor infractions. Nothing that seemed dangerous at the time, but looking back, signs of someone who couldn't control her emotions. The trial revealed Letecia's extensive social media activity. She posted constantly photos of the kids, family activities, creating the image of a perfect stepmom, perfect blended family. But her private messages told a different story. She complained about Albert, complained about his kids, complained about feeling unappreciated. The resentment built over time, and on January 27th, it exploded into violence. Mental health experts who testified analyzed what led to Gannon's murder. They noted Letecia showed signs of narcissistic personality disorder, an inflated sense of self-importance, a need for constant admiration, a complete lack of empathy for others. These traits don't automatically make someone a murderer, but combined with other factors, stress, resentment, opportunity, they created a dangerous person. The community impact of Gannon's murder was profound. Lorson Ranch had been a family-friendly neighborhood, the kind of place where kids played outside, where parents felt safe. After Gannon's death, that sense of security was shattered. Parents became hypervigilant, more cautious about who they trusted with their children, more aware that danger could come from within families, not just from strangers. Schools in the Colorado Springs area implemented new protocols. If a child is absent for multiple days without proper explanation, they follow up aggressively. They call the home. They send emails. They want to ensure the child is actually sick and safe. The case sparked conversations nationwide about stepfamily dynamics, about making sure children in blended families are protected, about watching for signs of resentment or abuse from stepparents. Most step-parent relationships are healthy and loving. Most step-parents would never harm their stepchildren. But Gannon's case showed that's not always true, that sometimes children are at risk from the very people who should be protecting them. Child welfare advocates used Gannon's case to push for better support systems for blended families, for resources to help step-parents adjust to their roles, for counseling to address resentment before it becomes dangerous. They also emphasized the importance of biological parents staying involved. Landon lived 1,200 miles away but maintained a close relationship with Gannon. She talked to him regularly. She knew what was happening in his life. And when he died, she became his fiercest advocate. She pushed investigators. She kept the case in the public eye. She ensured justice was pursued relentlessly. The surveillance camera that captured Gannon getting into Letecia's truck became a crucial teaching tool. Security experts now use this case to demonstrate the importance of home security cameras. Without that neighbor's Ring doorbell, Letecia's lies might never have been exposed. She could have maintained her story that Gannon disappeared on Wednesday, could have claimed she had no idea what happened. But the camera captured the truth, and the truth sent her to prison for life. Many families in Lorson Ranch installed cameras after Gannon's death. They wanted that documentation, that extra set of eyes, that potential evidence if something ever went wrong. The full scope of Letecia's cover-up became clear through court documents and testimony. She hadn't just killed Gannon and hidden his body. She'd created an elaborate deception that she maintained for weeks. While search parties were combing through Colorado looking for Gannon, Letecia was on social media. She posted about how worried she was, how she couldn't sleep, how she was praying for Gannon's safe return. She appeared on local news, did interviews, pleaded for Gannon to come home if he was watching, cried on camera. The performance was convincing to many viewers, all while knowing Gannon was dead, knowing she'd killed him, knowing his body was in a suitcase in Florida. The psychological manipulation required to maintain this deception is staggering. To look into cameras, to speak to reporters, to hug Albert while he cried, all while hiding the truth. Some people who knew Letecia said this behavior wasn't surprising. They said she'd always been manipulative, always played victim, always found ways to make situations about her. The trial revealed details about Letecia's trip to Florida. She told Albert she needed to get away, said the stress of Gannon being missing was too much, said she needed to visit family in South Carolina for emotional support. Albert had supported her going, thought she needed self-care, had no idea she was actually disposing of evidence. She made the 1,400-mile drive with Gannon's body in her truck, stopped at gas stations, stopped at hotels, ate at restaurants, acted like a normal traveler, all while transporting a dead child. When she reached the remote stretch of Highway 90 in Florida, she pulled over, dragged the suitcase into the brush, left Gannon there, then continued to South Carolina like nothing had happened. She visited with family, acted normal, pretended she was just on vacation. Nobody suspected anything was wrong. The coldness required to do this is incomprehensible. Most people who kill in a moment of rage show some remorse, some recognition of what they've done, some humanity. Letecia showed nothing. Her primary concern wasn't guilt about killing a child. It was fear of getting caught. All her actions were about self-preservation, about avoiding consequences. Forensic psychologists who studied the case noted this level of deception and lack of empathy is characteristic of severe personality disorders, of people who genuinely don't feel remorse the way others do. Albert Stauch has had to live with incredible guilt. He was away when Gannon was killed. He'd trusted Letecia with his children. He'd married her, brought her into their lives. Rationally, he knows he wasn't responsible. He couldn't have known what Letecia would do. He couldn't have predicted or prevented it. But parents don't think rationally when their children are murdered. They find ways to blame themselves. Albert carries the knowledge that his choice of partner led to his son's death. He's received extensive therapy, has tried to process the trauma, has tried to forgive himself. It's an ongoing struggle, something he'll work through for the rest of his life. He's largely stayed out of the public eye since the trial. The pain is too raw, the guilt too heavy. He's trying to move forward while carrying an impossible weight. Landon has her own guilt. She lived in South Carolina, wasn't there every day, couldn't protect Gannon, couldn't see what was happening. She wonders if there were signs she missed during their phone calls. Times when Gannon seemed off, moments when he seemed distant, red flags she should have caught. But she'd done nothing wrong. She was a good mother. She stayed involved despite the distance. She loved Gannon fiercely and made sure he knew it. Neither parent was responsible for what Letecia did. Only Letecia bears that burden. But logic doesn't ease a parent's guilt when their child has been murdered. Gannon's younger sister is growing up without her big brother. She was young when he died. Her memories of him will fade over time. She'll know him through photos and videos and stories. But she won't have the relationship they should have had. She'll need therapy, support, help processing the trauma of what happened in her home, of knowing the person who was supposed to be her mom killed her brother. The legal proceedings also revealed the toll on everyone involved in the investigation. The detectives who processed Gannon's bedroom, who saw the blood, who had to imagine what that child went through. The searchers who spent weeks looking for Gannon, hoping to find him alive, only to learn he'd been dead the entire time. The prosecutors who had to present the evidence, who had to show autopsy photos to a jury, who had to walk people through every horrific detail. The jurors who had to sit through weeks of testimony, who had to look at photos of Gannon's injuries, who had to make a decision that would affect lives forever. Everyone who touched this case was changed by it. It's not something you forget. It stays with you. The image of an 11-year-old boy who trusted the wrong person, who paid for that trust with his life. Gannon Stauch would have been 16 years old in 2025. He'd be in high school, playing video games with friends, maybe dating, thinking about getting his driver's license, planning for college, living the normal life of a teenager. Instead, his life ended at 11, ended violently, ended at the hands of someone who was supposed to protect him. His story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can hide behind normal appearances, that danger doesn't always come from strangers, that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we invite into our homes. Letecia Stauch remains in prison. She'll never leave. She'll grow old behind bars, eventually die there. She'll carry the label of child killer for the rest of her life. She's tried repeatedly to appeal her conviction. Every attempt has failed. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was just, there's no legal remedy for what she did. Landon Hyatt continues to advocate for child safety. She speaks at events about protecting children in blended families, about staying involved even when distance makes it difficult, about trusting your instincts if something feels wrong. She's worked with organizations that support families of murder victims, that provide resources and counseling, that help people navigate the impossible grief of losing a child to violence. She'll never fully heal from losing Gannon. That wound will never close, but she's trying to honor his memory, trying to make his death mean something, trying to protect other children. She's also raised awareness about the importance of documentation, security cameras, communication records, staying involved in your child's life even from a distance. Because in Gannon's case, that neighbor's camera and Landon's involvement were crucial to getting justice. The Lorson Ranch community holds an annual memorial for Gannon. They gather in a local park, release balloons, share memories, honor the boy who should still be with them. It's healing for the community, a way to remember, to show that Gannon's life mattered, that he was loved, that he won't be forgotten. The home where Gannon died has been sold. The new owners didn't know the history when they bought it. When they found out, they were devastated. That house will always carry the memory of what happened there. Gannon's case led to policy discussions about child welfare, about whether more oversight is needed in blended families, about whether schools and doctors should receive better training to recognize signs of abuse. Some argue that better systems could have saved Gannon, that if there had been more monitoring, someone might have noticed something was wrong. Others argue it's impossible to catch every case, that most blended families are healthy, that you can't surveil every home, that some tragedies are unavoidable no matter how many safeguards exist. Both perspectives have merit. Yes, we should do everything possible to protect children. But no, we can't catch every abuser before they act. Some evil is too well hidden. What we can do is educate, raise awareness, teach people to trust their instincts, teach children they can speak up if something's wrong, create cultures where disclosure is safe and believed. If Gannon had felt safe telling someone about problems at home, might he still be alive? Maybe. Or maybe Letecia's violence was so sudden there was no chance to intervene. We'll never know. All we know is that Gannon deserved better, deserved to grow up, deserved protection, deserved a life, deserved a future. Letecia Stauch took all of that away. She murdered an innocent child. disposed of him like trash, lied about it, and now she's paying the price. She'll spend decades behind bars, alone, despised, forgotten by everyone except those who remember her evil. Gannon, meanwhile, is remembered with love. His photos show a smiling boy, happy, full of life, bright future ahead. That's how people choose to remember him, not as a victim, but as a child who was loved, who mattered, who deserved so much more than what he got. Rest in peace, Gannon Stauch. You deserved a childhood. You deserved a future. You deserved to live. You deserved protection from the person who took your life. Justice has been served. Your killer will never be free. But that doesn't bring you back. And that's the tragedy that will never be undone. Stay safe out there. Protect the children in your life. Trust your instincts. Watch for warning signs. Create safe spaces for kids to speak up. Never assume that evil can't hide behind a normal face. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones we trust the most. I'll see you in the next case.